So hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes, sir, the presentation is visible.
Okay, excellent. So firstly, thank you so much for this opportunity to interact with your students and the wider community. I always love meeting with my juniors, and it's always nice to share your experiences in order to, if it throws some light for the younger generation. So I think in terms of the way I'm looking at the structure of the presentation today, I will lead with the session goals and show you some popular career planning techniques which you can use throughout your career, even if you're just getting started, or let's say you're already a few years into your career. And I think the most important takeaway from this session will be this slide section, which is to recognize that your career is a marathon, and it's not a sprint the first 2-3 years, or you're not doing this for a small number of years. We will be working, especially the current generation will be working into their late 60s because of the increased longevity of life, which means they will now need to be prepared for this marathon in a very different way than the previous generation, where people were working for the same company for 20 years or 25 years, and they would retire at the end of it at an earlier age in their 60s. Also, it's very important to recognize the role of happiness in one's life and career. Unfortunately, work is not a separate thing to life. They're interrelated, as you know. And let's look at some cutting edge research about the role of happiness and how it allows us to pick the right opportunities and shape our career in such a way that we feel fulfilled and satisfied in our careers. Towards the end, I will give you some actionable tips that you can use tomorrow morning or right away. So it's not just theory, but I want this to be super practical, and something especially in the current crisis of COVID. It's a very different world. So especially for people who are graduating now or who will be graduating within the next year, I have a few practical tips to share in order to increase their chances of success. And then I've dedicated a small section to current students. How can you maximize your remaining time on campus? What can you do differently to strengthen your CV and create more opportunities for yourself? And then finally, there'll be a Q&A. So I hope to finish my part of the presentation within 45 minutes, and then we can jump to the Q&A. So with that said, I think the introduction has already been made. One of the things that you can see from this slide is I love studying, I love education. I'm one of those people who's bought into the beauty and joy of learning from the teachers. And Dr. Anand Sharma happened to be my professor at BITS when I was doing some projects. And I absolutely love him. And I think this is a kind of relationship that I also enjoy maintaining with my profs many years down the line. So I did my undergrad at BITS, and during BITS, I spent almost half a year on an exchange at the University of Geneva working on quantum cryptography. I wrote my master's thesis in that subject. And then I went to Cambridge to read nanotechnology. So it was an academic pilgrimage of sorts. My favorite physicist is Professor Stephen Hawking. So I had the privilege and honor of going to Trinity Hall, which was his college at Cambridge. And later on, I worked for a few years. And then after getting some work experience, I decided to do my MBA from London Business School. And even during the LBS time, I spent half a year in the US, in Silicon Valley, doing my exchange at the University of California, Berkeley. And so in a way, I have experienced education systems of India, Europe, and of course, US, and they're all very different. So I should be able to throw some light, at least in the Q&A, for people who are considering Europe versus US as well. Professionally, my first job was with management consulting company called Bain in India. And then I joined a very early stage fintech startup, which later on became a unicorn in the UK. And then finally, I launched my own company. So what are the goals of the session? So firstly, I want to give you a framework to think about your own career journey that you can hopefully use in the months and years to come. And number two, I'd like to encourage you to make the best possible career decisions given the current crisis. I'll be sharing some of the examples that worked for me, that did not work for me during the key changes in my career. Hopefully, you can learn from the mistakes that I have made. And finally, as I said, I'll also leave you with some strategies to maximize the remaining time at university. I think I've just tasted a few more stops on the journey compared to somebody who is doing their undergrad now. So that's the only advantage that I have over you in terms of seeing a few more years out. And therefore, I'd love to learn from you as much as possible. Hopefully, whoever is attending this will be in touch, and I'd love to continue the engagement even after this. So let's go straight into the popular career planning techniques, which are at least adopted in India. So there are two styles that I have noticed. So on the left-hand side, you can see there is a classic follow the herd style where you do something because it's popular, it's risk-free, and those are probably the opportunities that you do get at university when you're graduating, because there's only a certain type of companies that come to placement, etc. So these could be consulting, banking, product management, or core engineering jobs if you're doing civil, mechanical. So you've got a limited pool, and the first couple of jobs, or the first job definitely is this is one way most people do it in India. Then the second thing is it could also be a template where you're collecting certain brands in order to like bolster your CV and resume. And again, this is an age where you don't know what you don't know. You're not sure if you want to be a product manager for the rest of your life, or you want to be a mechanical engineer for the rest of your life. It's just too early in your career, and it's okay to have lots of doubts, lots of interests. It's okay to keep your eyes and ears open, to try out and taste multiple industries. And it's also something that people look for is exit options, something that could give them greater optionality. You don't want to narrow down your choices just at the beginning of your 45-year career. So typically, whenever you don't get your true calling early on, I think this methodology could work. And this is, I think, the path that I have taken. I've done consulting. I discovered that it's something that is not for me. It's great for a lot of other people. So I closed that option. And then I moved for higher education. I wanted to see if research is for me. And after my Cambridge degree, I figured out that sitting in a lab and doing research for many years, and after that becoming an academic, is not an option. Is something that does not excite me enough. It's a great career, but not for me, not my cup of tea. So then I discovered that what I like is working at the interface of technology and business. So that's fun. I would love to be that guy who understands the technology, but also somebody who can take it from the lab to the marketplace, do something useful, and impact lives through a company. So on the left-hand side, you become a T-type person, which means you try out a lot of different things. You probably have a lot of breadth of skills in different countries, different industries, but maybe you have like one or two areas of expertise, hence you become a T-type. And then the cons of this approach, though, is you might lose a few years in the rat race, because let's say somebody actually wants to do their own company, or they want to become a musician or a cricketer or whatever, something which is really their passion. But if they follow this, then or acting, we have a lot of examples like that. Some of the people may lose a few years early on because they're sticking to this templated approach. So that's just a con. And another con is you might reach your goal. So if your goal is I want to become a consultant, or I want to get into Harvard Business School, etc., you might get there. But the question is, what if you don't find happiness or fulfillment? Because it was not something that you've selected out of your own interest, or because you followed a template. Again, nothing wrong with it, but ultimately the goal is to be happy. So that's another con. Usually this segment, the people who follow this path are driven by FOMO. It's a fear of missing out. I want to do X, I want to do Y, I want to see a lot more fields before I make up my mind. Again, understandable, it's natural, but these are some of the cons to be aware of, especially for the students who are still in the university to just think through. Now, contrast this with another approach where assume that you've already found your calling, or at least you firmly believe that this is your calling in life. And that gives you, when you take that leap of faith, it gives you a lot more time to go deep. So these are the people who dedicate their early career years to really developing expertise, whether it's in a particular field of research or photography or even core industry. And then they actually are driven by a lot more resilience and intrinsic motivation, because unfortunately we live in a world where there is a lot of noise. You get pulled in multiple directions. There's too many options. Our parents or the previous generation did not really have so many options to pursue, so they had it easier in a way, less distractions. So this requires a lot of listening to your inner conviction. It may be harder in the short term. You might need a safety net to take the leap. Not everybody is in a position to, you might have student loans, you might have to figure out other practical stuff like responsibilities that you may have before you can take this leap of faith. So these are like the two ends of the spectrum when it comes to the traditional early career planning in India. Now, you could find a middle ground between these two parts, and I think this is something that I've tried exploring, and it's a path that I feel like I'm currently on, which is early on you invest in your experiences, you chase the horizons to see what is it that really catches your attention, that makes your heart sing, and then finally you build the network, the skills, the capabilities to have the self-confidence to jump, take the leap of faith into something that you want to do. And at this point, I'd like to say that it's perfectly all right if you do not know what is the one thing that you want to do in life. I don't think the current careers or lives are meant to be like about a single destination, and once you reach the destination, it's the end of the journey. Unfortunately, the human mind will constantly be pushing yourself, especially you are studying at one of the country's best universities. So you will not be happy with the status quo. So, and that's totally fine. So don't try and force that final destination as something that has to appear early on. Just go with the flow, make it a journey of self-discovery and adventure, meet incredible people on the way, have fun, and acquire those skills. And I'll give you some practical frameworks on how to make this fun and also enriching for your personal self as well as professional self. And the advantage of taking the middle path at this stage is that you will be, you would have enough safety nets or the parachutes to take these leaps of faith. And if it doesn't work out, at least psychologically, you can assure yourself that, yes, I don't have to worry. I will not be jobless, or I will not die in poverty. I can always go back and get a job and figure it out. So that's the advantage of the middle path. Now, let's come to the most important section of my talk, which is the career as a marathon. This is something that I actually picked up during my business school from one of my professors, Professor Linda Grattan, and she's an authority in the world on this subject. She's written a book called 100-Year Life. And the argument that she makes in the book is currently the life is no longer going to be the 3-stage model on the left-hand side, but it will be the multi-stage life, as you can see on the right-hand side. So obviously in the 3-stage model, you're very familiar with this. For the first 20, 25 years of your life, you're studying, then you get a job. Maybe you do one job for 10, 20 years. At max, you probably switch to another job, and then eventually you retire, and that's about it. So here, I think this model worked in a world where the longevity of life was not that high. But in 2020 and moving forward, I think a lot of people that were born in the 2000s and late 90s, research is now showing us that they will continue to live longer compared to their previous generation. So what that means is life will no longer be as simple as a three-stage life. It will be a multi-stage where you will study a little bit, you will probably go on exploring different career paths, you work at some organization, then you leave that, you transition into maybe your own company, and then you do like some freelancing work on the side. Maybe you're an engineer with a passion for photography, so you're able to like mix both your professional qualification as well as your hobbies on the side and still make money, and then finally you retire. So this is a lot more to do, and this is a very difficult and different journey compared to the traditional model. And unfortunately, nobody prepares you for this during school. This is something that life happens to you, and you will be figuring it out as you go through all of these various stages. So today, hopefully, I'll be able to give you a little bit of a flavor of what things could look like in the future. And maybe with that in mind, you're able to better navigate and avoid some of the mistakes. So what does training for this marathon mean? So if you're working, let's say you're a 21-year-old today, and you will be retiring at the age of 70. So that's nearly 40, 45, close to even 50 years of work experience. Now, in this 5-decade-long body of work that you will be doing, you obviously need to take care of some of the assets that you have. I think the most important thing is your health, the vitality assets, as they are called, your work-life balance. There's actually no point if you're only chasing work and then you're a failure in your personal life. I think at the end of the day, you have to measure your life in a holistic manner, and your regenerative relationships. So how do you who do you keep in touch, and are you on great terms with your best friends, family members, teachers? So all of this is super important, because this prepares you for the 50-year-old marathon. And then financial assets are obviously important. It takes a lot of planning. All of those segues that you're making into, or those tiny leaps of faith, those have to be funded not just by psychological resilience, but also financial resilience. So unless you are good at financial planning and you are able to say, you know what, I've got an emergency fund for 1 year, which means I can take a sabbatical from my job, and for 6 months, I can truly explore my passion. And if it doesn't work out, that's great. It has not affected my mental health and my family's way of life in any way, or the lifestyle. So that is another important part. And of course, on the productive side, it's the skills, it's the knowledge, it's your professional networks. How are you able to build a certain reputation for yourself? Are you and your work ethic? Do you know what your strengths are, how hard you work, and how smart you work? So all of that would come here. And finally, the transformational assets. So once again, a lot of careers talks are usually made pretty binary and dull. I think a great career, and whenever you speak to these people, you'll also notice that they are highly spiritual and self-aware. And in India, we have these concepts like karma yoga, where you're working hard, and that's your journey to reach the ultimate point, whether you call it divine or anything. But this, when you enjoy what you do, and then you have the self-awareness that you find meaning in your work, that's also absolutely critical. So without this, even though you could be in the best of health, it may be a fantastic salary, you're learning a lot, but you will feel the emptiness. So all of these assets need to come together for you to be best prepared for this marathon. And so let's move to the next slide. It's a bit busy, this slide, but I wanted to give you, actually, I'll just take a quick pause here to just check on if I'm still connected and if everything is going fine. Okay, so looks like Harish has raised his hand for a question. Perhaps we can, Atul, would you like for us to take that towards the end?
Yes, sir. I think we should do that.
Okay. So far you're able to hear me and everything is going fine, right? Can I switch back to the presentation mode?
Sure, sir. Everything is going great.
Right. So here I'm trying to give you a little bit of a fast forward into what life could be like 10 years from now. Or pardon me, this is like an entire career that I've tried to map out on one slide. Now, obviously, this is one snapshot. This is one individual's career path. Different people have different interests, and all these boxes can be filled according to their interests. So let's start off. This is what a multi-stage life would look like. So I think the purpose of this slide is to give you a flavor of what this right-hand side would look like in reality. So you would start off with an undergrad, for example, engineering. You get the first job. Luck usually plays a decent role here. You already have, I mentioned, limited options. Let's say you work here for a few years, then you decide to go and do your higher education. Maybe you even move to a new country. Then you get a second job after your graduation. So you're building experience of working in a new country. This job, hopefully you've made a more informed decision. So you said, all right, I think I actually am interested in data analytics, and you choose something that's closer to what you want. At the same time, you discover that you have a passion for coding online, or it could even be like advising or preparing pitch decks, etc. So based on what you learned here, maybe in your first job or during like a extracurricular activity during universities, you start a small side hustle. You can go to so many of these freelancer.com websites, and it's more to just keep the interest going and maybe even makes a small money on the side. Then you change your job. At this point, you already have a few years of experience. Maybe you've got it's been 5 years since you've graduated, and you're now in a position to share some of your knowledge and experience with your juniors who are still here. So you take on some additional mentorship kind of activities. Then you finally decide, okay, you know what? I think I've worked enough. I need a break. I want to go back to school. This time I want to do an MBA. I want to acquire new skills. I want to improve my earning capabilities, and I want to change my industry. So classic point, then you apply, you take all of those tough exams, the GMATs, the GREs, you change the country. And then at this point, you're probably in your early to mid 30s. And then you start working with your other jobs. And from here, I think it gets exciting. Most people who graduate from business school, they typically tend to work in the first job for 2 years, if not less. So you're changing jobs much more quickly now. Then you probably decide to do your own startup, and then maybe you're so burnt out by the end of that because you've not worked on your vitality assets that you need to take a small break, a sabbatical. You go traveling to South America for a few months, and then your emergency fund allows you to do that if you planned it well. And then you come back and you get a job at a startup or a new job, and you work for a few years. You build some wealth, because now you've got like the business school network on top of your higher education network. It becomes easy for you to like get these roles. Over time, you also decide to become an angel investor, again, investing in some of the people that you've mentored here. And then you discover that, you know what, actually, I think I really like investing. It's a great career path for me. And you apply and you become a venture capitalist at a fund for a couple of years. And you might at this point be in your late 50s, and you feel, okay, now I have the toolkit, the experience, the wisdom, that let me go and become like a guest lecturer of entrepreneurship or history, anthropology, whatever has been your area of expertise so far. And you go back to school and you now teach the same students. Now just imagine like the kind of perspective that you would get as a 60 plus person in the year 2030 or 35, teaching an undergrad student at that time. So it's again mutually beneficial. You get enriched by new ideas. Then you think, you know what, you identify certain problems in the society and you go and start a social enterprise, or maybe you go and join a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to try and do something for the broader good. So far, you've been really working on your own personal life and family. At this point, maybe your children are already in school or they've just gone to college, so you have greater bandwidth. And you're now being asked to join boards of companies for your experience and expertise in certain areas. And finally, you retire officially in a way, and then you spend a lot more time with your family, and you still have a bunch of these side gigs going. Now, these could again be mentorship or whatever it is. That's why I left it blank. It really depends on the individual. So all through this journey, of course, it's important to take care of all of those various assets, continue to invest and reap them going forward. So what does that do? I think when you are actively managing your career, what it does is it gives you the strength, the courage, and most importantly, the toolkit to pivot. And all of these points are nothing but pivots that you're making. So like this, like this, like this journey. And these pivots, you never know how they happen, how somebody that you met in a different phase of your life can enable you to pivot into a different phase later. And this is why it's very important for you to give back as much as you can, because it's the classic concept of karma again in the Indian philosophy. The more you give, eventually you will also receive. So, and everything is going to be interconnected going forward. It's already super interconnected because of the internet, web 2.0. But in the future, I think the physical boundaries will be will not be as limiting as they have been. So I have recommended certain readings in all my slides. You will see the source and some recommended reads. There's a great book. It's called Pivot by Jenny Blake. She designed Google's Career Guru program. Worth reading. She goes into a lot more detail in terms of how do you plan the pivot. And think through. Obviously, I can't go into that level of detail in the time constraint that I have. Now let's come to let's take a small step back and outside of this whole career and all of this, and let's try and address something a lot more core to our very being. I think whatever we do, whatever activity we do, ultimately we are all in the pursuit of happiness. And this is true whether you're studying, whether you want to get a great GPA at college, or you want to get a good job. Eventually, it all boils down to happiness. You're doing it because it makes you happy at the last stage. However, there is a certain problem with this. The human minds are not very good at a few things. So they deceive us. And one of the main problems that I want to highlight is the technical term is hedonic adaptation. But to put it simply, what it does is anything which is wonderful, over a period of time, it does not retain its wonderfulness. And these are very obvious point. So, for example, when you got your admission in MUJ or your favorite college, you must be very happy on day one. Maybe for the first month, you were happy meeting seniors and batchmates, all of that. But before the exams of your first year, you probably were not like in the same frame of happiness. In fact, if anything, you were very nervous, you were worried. So that happiness, that's just a small example. Now, all the achievements that you do in your professional career, that the mind adapts to it, and its awesomeness, it just goes down over a period of time. And unfortunately, that is a reality. So how do you trick your mind? And let me give you a fantastic example. Most people, and which is very relevant to careers and one of the key inputs, which is money. Especially in emerging countries like ours, where salary and how much you are worth it's quite a significant influencing factor. Research has proven that greater salary. So on the curve on the top is actually your increase in real income. And a bunch of professors did research in the year 2010. This is for Germany. They collected the data, and they've tracked the earning potential of a lot of people from the early 1980s all the way to 2000, and they've measured against their personal happiness. And as you can see, sure, the happiness went up a little bit initially when their salaries raised from, let's say, 50,000, 52,000, 54,000 euros to 56,500. But over a period of time, as their salaries went up significantly, the happiness more or less plateaued. In fact, it even went down. It's a very important point because, again, coming back to the hedonic adaptation, your mind just gets used to, okay, so I'm making X lakhs per annum, CTC, but you still need the joy in other aspects of your life. So how do you fight the hedonic adaptation? Like, how do you get out of this trick of your mind? So I think step one is to acknowledge that there is something called the hedonic adaptation. We've all experienced this. At the very basic scale, it's with food. You eat the first ice cream, you like it. The second one, you like it a bit less. And the 10th one, you absolutely hate it, right? So in a way, you need to break free of these shackles. And the way you can do it is don't buy material things because, again, let's say you buy the latest Audi. On day one, it's fun. Day two, it's fun. And at the end of the year, it's fun. But then suddenly it just doesn't excite you as much as it excited you on day one when you discover that the value went down like 60%. Because so the trick to beat hedonic adaptation is to invest in experiences, because experiences by their very nature are short-lived. So, for example, all the great conversations that you had with your batchmates during your third year, second year, sitting in your canteens and discussing everything under the sun, those are the kind of experiences, the batch trips that you have made with your friends, or maybe you've done like some international travel during your undergrad, which gives you like these the joy in the moment, but you can't retain them forever. And the beauty of that is just because they are ephemeral, you're not giving them an opportunity to die away over a period of time. And the second thing is the power of gratitude. Now, this is something which I found very surprising. And let me again bring it to life with some real data. So what if I tell you that simply being grateful to the people or to the circumstances around you makes you happier? So there was an experiment conducted by Professor Martin Seligman, who is a leading authority on positive psychology in the world. Now, he conducted a test where he took two groups of people, the white group and, let's say, the black group, and he asked them to think about an event that generated happiness for them. So, for example, an event where they did a Euro trip because their school sponsored the trip. Just making the example. So before the test, they were both reasonably happy, similar levels of happiness. And the test was, why don't you, instead of just thinking about it, write a note of thank you to your school or to the person responsible for giving you that opportunity of happiness, whatever it is. So it could be your parents who've sponsored your education, or your professor who gave you an opportunity to do a project under him, which then led to a paper that was published, whatever it is. Simply by acknowledging and acting on that feeling of gratitude, by saying a thank you, a letter or something, the happiness lasted for longer, for as much as 3 months. So you can see the white curve or the white bar is still on top of the darker bar for as long as 3 months, because you have done something about it. So simply saying thank you. And there's so many people that have been responsible. It could even be your spouse, your parents, your uncles, your aunts, whoever were instrumental. Just tell them a thank you, and this is incredible. You will get greater happiness for the same experiment, for the same experience, simply by acknowledging that. So that was the first problem. And then that brings us to the second problem, which is our minds also tend to pick really poor reference points. I don't know if there's any swimmers in the attendees today, but the man in the middle, he's the golden boy, Michael Phelps. He's an Olympic swimmer. Obviously, he was breaking records left, right, and center. So he's won the gold. This guy won the silver, and this guy won the bronze. So obviously, you can see that Michael Phelps is happy. So is the bronze guy, but the silver person doesn't look particularly happy to me. And it's funny because he's actually number 2 in the world, but the number 3 is beaming. Let's understand why that is so. The reason for that is our minds tend to compare ourselves or our situation with somebody who's better than us, sometimes even hypothetically better than us, and then feel sorry for ourselves. This is where the whole social media revolution has come, where people constantly feel that their friends are having or family members are having a much better time than them, which is not true, because the whole point of social media is to only show the best positive side. You will never see me posting pictures of my rejections or when I go to pitch to investors or our product launch failures. No, you will only see the nice things, right? You will see when we won competitions, when we won incubators, like all the beautiful things that were said about in my intro. So why is this the case? Like, why do the minds do this? And is this actually an anomaly, or is there any research which backs that this is in fact true at a scale? So surprisingly, silver medal winners are less happy than bronze winners at most Olympics. And there was research done by Professor Medwick and others in 1995, where they analyzed this data from a few Olympics. So even when you are in the world's top 3, the second guy or girl is actually less happy compared to the third person. Very strange. And the reason for that is this person is comparing themselves to the person who's got first. And they are probably thinking, oh, had I pushed in like a little harder, 20th of a second would have given me like the gold. So they are worried about, what they could have been, as opposed to the fact that they're actually better than this person. However, on the other hand, the bronze medal person, which is this guy, he's really happy that he's even in the frame, because he's comparing himself to the fourth guy who came fourth. Maybe he missed out like by 100th of a second, but unfortunately, he doesn't have this moment in glory. So how do we feel good about ourselves and not compare ourselves to others who are on the surface better than us? And how do we get out of this issue? Here, I have a quick question for the audience. I'm not sure if they can type 1 or 2. Atul, I'll ask you this, but if they're able to type, can I just ask them, can I show them this question, and will they be able to pick option 1 or option 2?
Sure, sir, they can.
Okay, so that's great. So here's the question. A bunch of Harvard students in the late 90s, they were asked, what salary would you prefer? So option 1 is you would get $50,000, but others in your class will get half of what you get, $25,000. Option 2, you would get $100,000, but others in your class will get 2.5 times more than you. So this is, you're only comparing yourself with your graduating class. So the question is, what would you prefer? Let's say it's in your class. Which option would you go for? And I'll give you guys like 30 seconds to just type your answer. Any answers come through?
Yes, there are two answers saying option 2.
Got it. Third answer also. Okay, I'll just wait another 30 seconds. Don't be shy. Just pick something. There's no trick question here. And who cares if you get the wrong answer anyway, right? So would you? Let me just see if we've got any more. Okay, so we're getting some new answers as well. That's good. Anyway, so Harvard students picked as follows. So just over 50% of the class actually picked option 1. Now that's in absolute terms, they're actually getting 50% of what they would get if they picked option 2. But they picked it because everybody else in their class is getting half of what they're getting. So it's a classic reference point where they're only looking at the immediate vicinity people. Whereas in option 2, which is obviously what I would pick, because in absolute dollar terms, you're getting twice as much money, so you can buy twice as many things with that salary. Who cares if all your friends are getting 250K? But the world is a much bigger place. Outside of your class, 100K is still better than 50K. So here, I think most of the people ended up picking option 2. But again, this is something that relativity sometimes is actually not good in our favor. And finally, I think this section can be wrapped up with this slide, which says, so how do I break free from this this problem, which is the reference point problem? And the answer is negative visualization. Instead of always comparing ourselves with people that are a lot more successful than us and feeling bad about it, because again, this is all a theoretical comparison that we do. And Charles Montesquieu, a famous French philosopher, he said, if we just wanted to be happy, it would be pretty easy. But the problem is we want to be happier compared to other people. Now, this is difficult because we always think that they're happier than they truly are. This is perfect for the social media generation. And I gave you the example earlier. You always think that everybody else is much more successful, happier, a lot more better looking, all of that, but we don't really know the reality of their circumstance. So how do you break free from this? Think about people that are actually less fortunate than you are, and then be thankful for what you've been given and how you can move on with those gifts. Now, this is part of a fantastic course called the Science of Wellbeing, which is Yale University's most subscribed course ever. It broke a 350-year record. It's free on Coursera. I would strongly encourage you guys to check the course out. If interested, please do it. I think it's going to really give you something life-changing that you can keep for the rest of your life. All right. So now switching gears to some more practical stuff. And framework for your career management, as I mentioned in one of my session goals. Peter Drucker is a world-leading authority on management science, especially strategy, and he has a system where his basic point is today the companies will not be able to invest in your personal training and experiences because people are no longer spending 25 years at one company. They might train you for a few years, but if you leave within 6 months or 1 year, what's the point? So you need to be in the driving seat of your own career. You need to be the CEO of your career and manage yourself. It's a very powerful concept, and I'll quickly give you the gist of what this is. What he says is there's 3 pillars. So number 1, you need to know yourself, and that's critical. Then you need to manage relationships actively. And finally, you need to plan the second half of life. So when he is referring to second half of life, he's referring to the multi-stage life with all of the other things that I mentioned about after your first job. So fundamentally, now you can see know about oneself. Now this is very spiritual, right? The message, this is what all the Buddhas and the Confucius, everybody keeps saying, know yourself, know yourself. And it's important because without that, it's easy for you to get lost in the noise and miss out on the signal that your heart is giving. So in order to do this, you need to first articulate what your strengths are. So for all the engineering nerds out there, we can literally apply the feedback analysis loop here. So you try something, have a hypothesis, and at the end of 9 to 12 months, you test out in that project or in that year or in that job, what were you very good at, what were you moderate at, and what did you really suck at. And just having a good understanding of that is quite powerful, because once you articulate and know your strengths, then you'll be able to double down on those and perhaps even improve the ones where you're mediocre. But where you really suck, maybe you can close out those options instead of trying to expend 90% of your effort to improve 10% there. Maybe if you focus on your strengths, another 10-20% here can really put you in the top 99 percentile of the world. So a lot of people go through careers without ever taking a step back and thinking, meditating about what their strengths are. And most people, again, very important to understand, how do you learn. So for example, a lot of people perform well because they are readers. They like to absorb material because they enjoy reading, and then that's how they learn. But some of them are actually listeners. So they just have to listen to somebody speak. And that's how they retain the most amount of information and knowledge. So you need to know which category you fall under. And thirdly, what your values are. I mean, everybody has certain values. You might say, I'm anti lending, or I'm anti gambling industries. Or you might say, you know what, I'm very pro environment. So whatever your values are, if you know that, and at the time when you get a job that there is a fit with the value, that resonance can do wonders for your career also. Something to think deeply, especially as you go further in your career. And belonging to the culture of the company.
Sir, I had to interrupt, but I think your presentation is not visible on a full screen. So I would suggest please get into a presentation mode.
Thank you, Atul. Now it's in presentation mode.
Yes,
Apologies for that. So
no
the first pillar is knowing about yourself. And then the second one is managing relationships. So most people, and there's I think I was guilty of this in the past. When you are like a hardcore research guy, you tend to look down upon business people, the networkers, the money makers, and say, oh no, it's like physics is very, very great. It's very difficult, but business and economics, marketing, sales, all of that is beneath me, and I don't even want to try that out. But unfortunately, that kind of an attitude is self-defeating, because you have to work with other people in your career, and it's very important to have an open mind and appreciate knowledge in every domain. Sure, physics may be great, but so is sales and marketing, so is business development when done correctly, and different people have their own biases. So that's accepting others as individuals is very important. And then taking responsibility for communication. One of the most important things that, in my view, that has a big role in career progression is your communication skills, the softer skills, how you are able to articulate your personal brand, how are you able to sell yourself, but without seeming like you're selling yourself, and what your style of working is. So here communication, it actually refers to, okay, I am a listener. So if you tell me, then I'll be able to understand better. And by the way, I have a family. I need to go home around 7 o'clock to put my kids to bed, and setting expectations with your colleagues. So it's that kind of a one-on-one communication and asking them what matters most to them. Most people, again, don't have these conversations at work. They just assume and put these kind of conversations under the carpet. So try having these to have a much more healthier working relationship with all of your peers. And planning the second half, I think I've already gone in great detail here. You can start a new career, develop a parallel career, as I was showing with those blocks earlier, and whatever it is. One key point that Peter Drucker says is, if you've never mentored or volunteered before the age of 40, then you're unlikely to do it after the age of 60. Apparently, there is research which backs this. So try and make that a habit to take some time out and volunteer for something you care about. So some actionable stuff and tips. Make sure your LinkedIn is up to date. I'm very happy to share a separate deck on this. I've prepared one, so just email me after this and I'll share that with you. Write an awesome CV. Again, I'm happy to review it. Feel free to send me a note. Actively manage and build your network. Keep in touch with your professors, your seniors, your batchmates, the parents of your batchmates. And if you like some companies in India or abroad, reach out to the founders with some value add, with some of the solutions to problems they care about. Luckily, right now, it's only problems everywhere. Every industry has been affected. So think about it. Use your time. Figure out how you would solve a particular problem if you were in their shoes. And that is guaranteed to get their attention. Identify role models. Reach out to them. Try and learn how to articulate a clear personal brand for you. And again, there's a lot of material on this. And explore new ways to broaden or deepen your skills. So lots of free online courses, do some internships, side hustle, work on your writing and speaking skills, very, very important. Take every opportunity that you can present to others so that you only get better. I think Richard Feynman said the best way to improve and increase your knowledge is when you teach others. And of course, cultivate the skill of lifelong learning. I think this is much more of a long-term goal. I'm pretty sure at your university, you're learning how to learn because your learning doesn't stop when you graduate. And finally, build systems and not goals. What I mean by that is don't just stay focused on doing an MBA from IIM or XYZ school or getting into a certain company for a job. It's actually a lot deeper than that. Build a system. Pick up the transferable skills from each job or your side hustle. Avoid getting into autopilot modes where you're just like doing the same thing for 20 years. That doesn't make you get 20 years of experience. It's just 1 year's experience repeated 20 times. It can really make a massive plateau and skill deficiency. It can lead to skill deficiency. And finally, I think most people are confused about the definition of networking, and they're very hesitant, and they see it as something which is bad. I think, in my view, networking means giving back and adding value. So whenever you enter a room or whenever you go and meet people at conferences, just keep at the back of your mind this question: how can I add value to this person? How can I help him? As opposed to how can I get something from them? And that just simple, just flipping the objective on its head can make wonders for you. Because human beings, by their very nature, also like to be in gratitude. So when you do something for other people, you make a longer impression on them as opposed to somebody who's there to take from them. And I'm sure you can think of examples in your own life where somebody helped you and that person is much more memorable as opposed to some people that you've helped or somebody that's taken from you. So last couple of minutes, maximizing your time at college. Excuse me. So at BITS during my undergrad, we had something called Practice School 1 where you could go and spend some time in a research place or at an industry. I understand that right now it's all work from home. So try and get the best one that you could get and give your best shot there, because that can be your springboard to the next opportunity. I created my own opportunity for an international thesis. I wrote to 400 plus professors worldwide in my third year to get a thesis in my fifth year. And I got, I think 1% of the professors said, yes, we'll give you a scholarship. So I had options and I picked Geneva, obviously, because it was a great group and it was also Switzerland. I participated a lot in the EEE association at BITS, wrote a bunch of review papers. to try and get my hands dirty at research and how do you really get into research. Presented, attended technical fests at several colleges. I did a lot of projects, so we could do several electives, yeah, at BITS. So all of these things that I did earlier certainly helped a lot for my MS application. I even ended up saving money because I was getting paid in francs, so that again helped me offset some of my living expenses at Cambridge. It helped in campus placements because my CV was a lot more interesting. I was one of the few people that had international experience as an undergrad student for like over half a year. So that caught the attention of Bain. So everything that you do, it has an it can have an additive effect to your resume. And finally, I think this is very important: the financial jugaad. So always see how you can learn to monetize your skills, time, save up, because then that gives you additional freedom to take on certain leaps of faith. And of course, it has to be a journey of self-discovery. It needs to be an adventure. You don't want everything to be super planned. Leave some. You just get the general direction right, and after that, you can figure out and navigate the details. So for the current students, the COVID challenges, what I understand from your professors is internships have been moved to work from home. Job holders, some of the starting dates have been postponed. If you're already secured admissions and in universities abroad, travel may be restricted, and so on and so forth. So, of course, this is very, very challenging time. But if you look at it another way, it's probably going to be another few years before you get something as bad as this to the economy or to the world in general. So you're now going through a time that also gives you an opportunity to build your resilience muscles. I know it's tough, but it's tough for everybody, and so use this to practice the resilience and personal strength. Keep your spirits up and identify. So practically identify booming industries in COVID. So online education, healthcare, online communication tools. So there's a lot of industries that have actually been positively impacted because of COVID. And figure out the problems for companies that are growing quickly in these booming industries, as well as companies that need to pivot from real world, like your restaurants, gyms, etc. How do you how can you help them increase revenues and cut costs? If you're looking for jobs there, write to their founders, their top management, saying in your cover letter, suggest solutions, which, and I'm sure this is actually not rocket science. You can put your brains together and come up with something clever. And again, that will catch their attention, and hopefully you will get an interview. And already from a couple of previous webinars that I've done, people have implemented these, and they've got an entire year's subscription fee for a Silicon Valley product, because somebody just wrote to the founders about the problem and how they appreciate what the company is doing. So at that point, I think I'll wrap up my presentation and I'll open the floor to any questions. Atul, can you still hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Your voice and video is clear. So all the people that have questions can unmute their mic now, so that we can hear the questions.
Any query from the participant sides? Attendees, please, if you have any query, you can ask.
Or it could even be comments on any of the. If you disagree with something, I think it's a great opportunity to like express your opinion.
Hey, Vishnu, this is Alagesi. Actually, I'm not a student. I'm not a professor. Somebody sent me this link, and I just attended this link. So you can identify me as MD India. So actually, I'm working as a vice president with
Thanks to
Bombardier.
Mr. Vishnu. Anyone, any query?
Yes, I think one gentleman is asking his query, Mr. It says MI. Let me just see his name. Yes, sir. Please carry on.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Yeah.
All right. So as I was saying, I'm not a student. I'm not a professor. I got a link from one of my colleague in my company. So I'm working as a vice president with Bombardier. So I'm a ex-student of BITS Pilani as well. So there's a comment to Vishnu, very well organized thoughts, and in fact you resonate a lot of my thoughts as well. I used to talk to my own colleagues and my employees in the office, and that note that my colleague has sent this link that the career is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So I used to use this word most of the time with my colleagues. So excellent thoughts, Vishnu. I think we need to connect beyond this particular seminar, but it was an excellent one for all the students who are attending here. So thank you for your time and efforts.
Oh, thank you very much for the kind message, sir. I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn and carry on this conversation. And it's always great to meet a bit senior.
Any other question?
Thank you.
On behalf of the Manipal University, Jaipur, I would like to express my sincere thanks to Mr. Vishnu for sparing his valuable time and accepting our request to be speaker of the today's webinar. The webinar was very excellent and informative. I would like to thank the technical team and the graphics team also, and all others involved directly or indirectly in the successful conduct of this webinar. Thanks to all the participants. Thank you very much. Thank you, Vishnu sir, once again.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot. And guys, please get in touch with me if I can help you, especially the students. And don't hesitate to reach out and keep in touch, because I have been mentoring over the weekends most of my juniors from BITS, and I see you guys also as my juniors. So please reach out.
Sir, excellent webinar. Excellent. It's a very good webinar.
All right. Thank you. Bye bye.
Sir,
Thank you, sir. Bye bye. Bye bye.
thank you very much. It's a really very good webinar. Really excellent.
My pleasure.